Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Lesley Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 42 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Lesley. If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. Today we have a guest on our show and I'm so excited to welcome Cheryl Magowan. Now Cheryl was a client of mine back in 2014 and is originally from Manchester but now lives in my home county of Lancashire. It's fair to say the decluttering process had a big impact on the direction that Cheryl's life took after we first met. I don't want to spoil Cheryl's story and she can tell it for herself, so let's jump straight in. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you? I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I know, it's so excited. You know, as I said in the intro, really, it's a long time since we worked together, but we're still friends on Facebook and we still see what each other's doing. So, you know, you feel that connection anyway. So it's just really interesting to see the sort of path that your life has taken. And you had a massive, massive impact on me when we first met. I think you're certainly what I would call one of life's special people without wanting to sound patronising. But there was something at the point that we met, which is why you called me in, I guess, not working for you in your life. And you wanted to tackle it, starting with your clutter. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Cheryl?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The moment that I realised that I couldn't carry on was when I woke up one morning and I couldn't find my car keys and I couldn't find my shoes, and it was covered, basically. I couldn't see my floor. And I realised that I just had too much stuff. And I think it was that day, actually, I found Clutter Fairy and I contacted you and I put the phone down about 3 times because I was that nervous. And I think on the 3rd time, I got through, and then something within me just said enough. You know, I'd been living with far too much stuff for years and years and years, and I didn't realise how much I'd become okay with it. And I didn't realise how much I was functioning dysfunctionally. And sometimes you get that used to seeing something being so chronic, it doesn't seem as chronic.
Yeah, you get so used to seeing it, don't you? And so you it's there every day, so you don't see it anymore.
Exactly. And practically speaking, it was making my life a nightmare. So what I mean by that is I would be getting bills and that I wasn't paying, that I didn't realise that I needed to pay. I was also getting refunds, so I'd have cheques as well sent to me. I found this out when I started to do the decluttering process and started on the programme. But I found cheques for like £100 rebates, £50 rebates, but they were that old I couldn't cash them in. So I was missing out on claiming money. And also I was getting fined because I was just not covering my bills because I wasn't opening any letters. I had an obsession as well with paper. I know that now. I can say that sitting here now, but then I didn't. My big obsessions were paper and clothes.
Yeah.
Huge, huge, huge shopping addiction. And generally, without any holding back or exaggeration, I was miserable. I had that much stuff. I was just packing every orifice of my life and my home with stuff.
Yeah, trying to sort of fill a gap, really, isn't it? That's the thing with retail therapy in particular, that you are trying to sort of fill a void somewhere with your life, and sometimes that can't be filled. And I remember that, you know, of course I see clutter and I see that volume of clutter, you know, most days of my life, really, so it never shocks me anymore. And what I remember about you, Cheryl, and it is a while ago, is that you had lots of very beautiful clothes, lots and lots of them. And I know that you were a TK Maxx addict. Is that fair to say? You love a bargain, and you loved your TK Maxx. And so for our American listeners, I don't know whether there is TK Maxx. Oh, you've been to America, Cheryl, because your mum used to live there. So is the TK Maxx in America?
Yeah, it's called TJ Maxx.
Oh, right. Okay. TJ Maxx. And so a kind of, beautiful things, but for good prices, that kind of thing, isn't it? So you loved your TK Maxx shops, didn't you? And you used to go in there most weeks, didn't you?
I was in there to the point where I knew which staff would be on what shift, because I was in there every single day, and I couldn't actually afford to be in there. So it was all on a credit card. And then, of course, I wasn't paying the bills because I wasn't opening the letters because I couldn't find them. So I didn't know what was coming through to me. So it was a catalogue of stuff, just getting stress from bills, and then warnings. And then also, when you're having agencies contact you via phone, we're trying to get hold of you because your unpaid bill has been passed on to this debt collection agency. And you're like, what? I didn't know anything about this. And it just escalated to that point internally. And then externally, I was going out and still doing the same thing. So I was stuck on this loop. And it literally was an addiction. I mean, I knew exactly what time the stores would be closed for each one, because it wasn't just it was mainly TK Maxx. Also, at the time, it was something that would give me a social outlet. So I wasn't actually really happy. I didn't have a great deal of friends. A lot of my old friends had sort of got married, and they weren't around anymore in the same way. So I felt really lonely. So my entire love and connection to who I was would come through me buying something to give me a hit and a high. But of course it wouldn't last. And then I'd have to go out and buy another one every single day.
Yeah, so then it becomes a sort of vicious cycle, really. And I think, the interesting thing about going through the decluttering process, and this is quite classic for people who've got a bit of a shopping addiction or a retail therapy addiction, is that there's always lots and lots of things that need to go back. So there's lots of returns around. So I remember finding, and quite often we will do that when we're decluttering, there might be 10 or 12 bags of things that have yet to be returned. And quite often what happens then is that those things don't get returned. So they absolutely are clutter, and it's a complete waste of money as well. So it's that buying things but actually not being sure about it as well. So that's a classic sign really of somebody that has got a bit of a retail therapy addiction, which I think it's fair to say that you did have. And I know it was a social thing. Am I right in thinking, Cheryl, that it was something that you used to do with your mum to go out shopping?
Yeah, it was. It was a huge part of my childhood. So my father is Irish and my mother is from the Caribbean. And she was someone that really endured quite a lot of racism. She endured when she first came to this country, she was 20. Yeah, it used to be a case of she would face quite a lot of judgment. So she's a black woman. She has 2 kids, because it was me and my big brother. And she would ensure on a daily basis, verbally and practically and physically, that me and my brother always looked our best. So that meant literally we would have brand new Nike Air Max trainers. We would have brand new Adidas trackies at school. We'd have the best school bag, the best pens, the best notebooks. We'd have everything that was ultra expensive, and presented this, you have the best in life, which I'm not criticizing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. She was an incredible mother, and she still is. What that gave me though was this sense of 2 things, that I always had to have the best, right? Which is ironic because I never actually felt comfortable with the best. A little bit like I would buy these things for myself as I got older, or I would be given a brand new pair of the latest trainers at school, but I would never feel comfortable with them. So I'd never fully own them, which is ironic because I'm getting the best, but yeah, I would be like, oh, I'd sort of try and dumb it down or try and hide whatever it was that I had. So a lot of my friends at the time didn't have money. So here I am. I'm the only mixed race girl in the village, me and my brother, and yet I have all the best things. So a lot of my friends would feel pretty awful, and I would see this and I would immediately try and change the subject or try and hide what I had. The second thing it gave me was time with my mum. So she was someone that was a very hardworking nurse. She would do night shifts. So the only time we get to spend with each other is on a Saturday. And my mum's not a talker. She's a doer and the talker. But she would say straight away in the morning, right, let's go, let's get up and let's go out and we'll go shopping, in her Trinidadian accent, because she's from Trinidad, which is an island in the Caribbean. So it meant that I'd spend the whole day with my mum. So I would be so happy just to spend time with her. For me, shopping was more than the item itself. It was a social thing, and it was, if it could speak, it would say, your mum loves you, Cheryl. She does, because this is what you're doing together. So it would have a profound comfort. And yeah, and it would always be funny. I would accept things my mum would buy me that I actually didn't want. I didn't need them and I didn't want them. And I remember thinking this at like 4 and 5. It didn't really do it for me, but being with my mum did.
Yeah, I think there's so many really interesting things wrapped up in that, really, Cheryl, because it's very, very common. So the social thing, particularly with girls and mums, is definitely a big thing, that kind of going out and socially, it's the equivalent of going out and having a glass of wine with your friends, isn't it? That's what you do with your mum, which is a really, really lovely thing. But, there's an end point to that, and there's a kind of compulsion then to buy something, isn't there? If you go out shopping, you can't just go and window shop. And I think the other thing, which was really interesting, is you're talking about what probably stems from your mum's own insecurities and feeling judged as somebody that had come over from Trinidad, married to a white man. This is a while ago now. The times were very different then, and so she was trying to, peer pressure, really, I guess, wasn't it, for her? And like, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to be better than that. And that came from the stuff, and that's really interesting to sort of see that. And I think that was one thing that resonated with me when we actually met. Was the clothes and how that was wrapped up into kind of social time with your mum, which is lovely, but yet has an impact and has a result, doesn't it, really? The other thing that I remember, Cheryl, in terms of volumes, obviously there was paperwork, there was clothes, and the other thing that I do remember is you're vegan, and there was lots and lots of food, big high volumes of food in your kitchen, which we had to sort of tackle, didn't we? So what are your thoughts on, from where you were and where you've come from? And obviously you're a healthy eater. Food is something that you feel very passionately about, and you want to look after yourself and always did, but the volumes were quite big. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the food for me has always been a huge battle. It was something growing up. I lived above, my dad was a butcher. So my bed was above his butcher's shop, and I would spend my childhood running in and out of his butcher's shop, screaming at people not to eat what they were going to buy. I was just creating chaos, really. And back then, I remember feeling very, very confused about food, just from the way in which what my dad was doing with the butcher shop. But then also, we would have at our house, we'd have these rations. So my mum would get Tupperware boxes, and she'd say to me and my brother, you're only having like so many digestive chocolate biscuits, or you're only having so many trios, these little snack bars. My mum was a health and fitness freak. So was my dad and my brother. I wasn't. I was quite an overweight kid and I couldn't be bothered doing the stuff they did. But it was very regimed. So my examples of food were either this sort of bloody raw flesh, which was the meat, right, in the shop, or it was this sort of very, very categorized system of this is how much you're going to have and there's no more. So when I grew up, I had a very, very strange relationship with food that just wasn't comfy. By the time I got my house, which was like a few years later, I had this thing where I had to have enough food and I had to do big weekly shops and then a monthly shop and then a daily shop. I was always worried about never having enough. Also, I'm vegan. I became vegan in 2003 because I had tumours. I was very sick and I died. I had a cardiac arrest in hospital and the tumours were £3. I had a cardiac arrest. I died. I remember everything as well, what happened. And my life changed that day. It was on Valentine's Day. But that's another story. From when I died, I decided that I wanted to live. And that health had to be the way in which I could live and live well, because I was afraid of the tumours coming back and I was afraid that I would not make a mark on the planet. So I figured the only thing to do both of those things is to look at what I was eating. However, I went too far and became obsessed really with always having. I just had this thing where I had to have food. I had to have food in.
You know, there's so much psychology wrapped up in the amount of stuff that we keep around us. And that's obviously, and yours was, you know, it wasn't that you didn't have enough, but it was that it was kind of rationed almost for a different reason, which is quite interesting as well. But we had to declutter a lot of that food because it was out of date, and that would have been difficult for you to do, but nevertheless it had to be done. But then obviously after that, you had a different idea about that, and presumably now your volumes are under control and normal and natural and fit for what you need to do on a weekly basis in terms of your eating.
Yeah, they are. And I remember that was one of the most difficult parts of the process was throwing away food that couldn't be consumed because it felt very immoral. Even though ironically it couldn't be consumed, but there was dried food that I had like that was 10 years out of date or something ridiculous. And it was it just felt very wasteful, and it was very wasteful, but it was just so habitual. And going through that program, that system of actually stop and look at what you're doing, because it became so habitual. It was a case of I need to go shopping, not what do I need. It was an automatic, robotic response of I'm going the Asda, or I'm going the Sainsbury's or whatever, or the local supermarket, and it was throw it in. And I would also be obsessed with 3 for 2 or 50% off when I didn't need it.
I think that's really interesting, that psychology, Cheryl, about that you went shopping rather than that you needed to shop. No, that's really good. And I think what we did within that is, you know, you were obviously going through a real change in your life, I think, at the time that you called me, which is very, very common with people. They're like, I've had enough, I need to change, and I need to understand why I am doing what I am doing. And I think that there was an opportunity to sit and reflect on your own behaviours. So we're not going to talk about what we did from a decluttering perspective, but what we did was what I do with all of my clients, so why are you doing that? And it gives you an opportunity then to reflect on your own behaviours and then to make a change. And I think sometimes you need somebody to kind of sit in and say, why don't you think about doing it differently? So why are you going shopping every week? Can you make that change? Can you not go to TK Maxx every day? You know, things like that. And I think once you've gone through the process and you see how cathartic it can be and how freeing and enlightening it can be, then that's enough to motivate you forwards, I think. And you have to go through that process. And for some people, they need somebody right by the side doing that. That was what was really interesting for me. I think we certainly did multiple sessions, 3, 4, 5 sessions, something like that. And I remember we obviously, with all my clients, have an opportunity to chat as well. Chatting, you know, you and I can both chat, Cheryl. So we did lots of chatting. I know that you were quite unhappy with the job that you were doing, and you had this yearning to be a yoga teacher, didn't you? So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was very unhappy with the work, the working environment, the job that I'd studied. I had a master's degree and an English degree, and I'd landed on paper a fantastic job, but I wasn't happy. Underneath all this, I'd always wanted to be a yoga teacher. I'd always wanted to help people heal themselves, basically, because it's what I'd done with me. And I knew that everyone's got the power to heal. They just have. That's what the body's designed to do. It's incredible. But yet here was I with this, the big dream, and I couldn't really make it happen. You know, I didn't have the space in me house, let alone in my head, to just figure out a way of leaving one lifestyle that was paying. I mean, I had a job that would pay me a salary, guaranteed every month, and I had status with that because it was a senior manager position. However, I just wasn't fulfilled. The yoga came about because I was able to clear the decks. I was able to say, right, you know, let me strip back and actually see. When I say strip, I mean, of all the stuff, literally take off and away all of the stuff that is not you and is not needed to be able to see the real you. Because do you know what, Lesley? I was living under a mask. I was going to work and people would comment how amazing I looked in my outfits, and that gave me such a buzz and such a high. And then I was coming back to absolute hell. You know, I mean, there's no other way of describing it. I wasn't living my truth. So the things that people were complimenting me on was not the true me. And I realized that when I engaged in the system, you know, and I started to declutter, that I started to reveal who I really, really was and the value of who I am. And that was such a painstaking process because I built up a facade within having stuff that it was not easy to let that go, but it had to because it wasn't me. And as soon as I was able to sort of grab that by the hands and run, everything started to fall into place. So things like, as soon as I got more space in my wardrobes and in my kitchen, from chucking out all the old food and selling all the clothes, I got onto a teacher training course for yoga, and I started that, you know, and then within a short space of time, I'd also done a counselling course, and I'd also done a nutritional course. So I ended up doing all of the things that I really, really, really wanted to do, putting them all together. And then because I'd managed to do all of the things I'd wanted to do that were really, really me, I was like, I can make this work. I can, you know, I can try. And I got a little bit of a payout from work because jobs were going and stuff. So they were making redundancies and settlements. So I just thought, do you know what, jump. Because if not now, when? So I jumped, and everything just seemed to align. And I started teaching people how to heal themselves. And in the process, I was healing myself. So, yeah, I got to do it. I got to do my yoga.
Which is fantastic. And I know since then we've spoken about, so there is a yogic learning. This is where you'll have to forgive my terminology, Cheryl, because I don't know too much about yoga. But there is a yogic belief that links directly to living harmoniously, isn't there? That you talk to me about, and you feel that the sort of decluttering and the simplification has definitely been part of that. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically, you don't have to go to yoga to be a yogi. And so another extension of that is, well, why would I want to be a yogi? Well, yogis are kind-hearted, loving, and prosperous in their nature. And who wouldn't want that? So essentially, we're all born as incredible, magical beings, which is another word for being yogi. So I'm not talking about stretching or flinging yourself on the mat. I'm just talking about just the basics of being an incredibly powerful human being, making amazing things happen in your life and in others. Now, we in the West have gotten yoga a little bit mixed up, because when we say the word yoga, we instantly think of a yoga mat, a very pristinely toned body that's very flexible and like a pretzel. But that's not the case. I mean, it's part of it, but the biggest definition of yoga is actually a system of living where it is optimal. So what I mean by that is living your truth and being who you really are, whether it's in your home or out and about in your everyday, when you're with your friends, your family, or you're out and about doing your errands. Now, in yoga, there's a system that's called the 8 limbs of yoga. These 8 strands are ways in which you can live your life more effectively and more healthily. 2 of those are directly related to clutter. And the first one is about not being harmful to yourself or others. And this strand, which is one of the limbs, is called ahimsa. And in ahimsa, it says, look, ahimsa means be kind to yourself and be kind to others. The second one is called aparigraha. Aparigraha means non-attachment. So it means that throughout a human being's life, there is a constant striving to be not grippy or attached to another thing or another person or another situation or something that's external to you, even a concept, even an idea. So don't cling on to anything. And that's called a parigraha.
And that's the really interesting part with the clutter and everything that you spoke about at the beginning of the podcast. That's all linked, isn't it? This clinging on that you had to stuff in general, whether that was clothes, whether it was food, whether it was paperwork. So yeah, I find that completely fascinating.
But we're very much encouraged to have the latest something, to have more than what we need, to always look good, to always be on trend, to follow fashion, to have all of these things and to be accepted, and that's what we do. And I do it, sometimes we live in this world where we're constantly chasing and we will never catch up because there's always a new version of something when the old version is fine.
I think the really interesting thing for me, Cheryl, is, yoga is on my list of things to do, but I'm talking of the mat variety. But maybe I'll go a little bit further. I need to come to, if only you were on my doorstep, Cheryl, but you're not. But anyway, I think it's really interesting that the decluttering, we know through experience that decluttering is a very freeing, cathartic, enlightening process for everybody. And I can say that for everybody. I don't think there's anybody that ever has regrets going through the decluttering process or ever worries about what they've got rid of or anything like that. I think for the most part, it's a very, very positive process for most people. So is there anything else that you'd like to add, Cheryl, before we finish off?
There's 2 things, if it's okay. Firstly, I really, really want to say thank you. I can't thank you enough. I mean, the way in which my life transformed has just been incredible. And without some sort of system, without some sort of approach, it would have been impossible. I would not be living the dream life I'm living now. And it's something that I can't really, just to say thank you doesn't feel enough. I think the thing that was even more than the practical steps, though, Lesley, was the fact that what you taught and what you have left with me is still everything that I learned is still with me today. And because it was taught in such an unconditional, non-judgmental way, I was able to break through the shame that I had with the way in which I was living, that only me and me alone knew. The rest of the world thought that I was this very together, very with it, glamorous little thing. I couldn't tackle that without getting over this shame that I had. I feel quite emotional actually just talking about it now, because it really was crippling. And because I was given this way through with everything that was about the decluttering system, it was something that didn't judge me. You know, everything that I was able to learn from what you offered was really about saying, you're a good person. You know, you're not somebody that has failed. You're not somebody that hasn't made it in life. You're somebody that, you know, is fundamentally, absolutely amazing. How about incorporating this into your day-to-day? And that was something that I felt so bad. I used to just feel like, you know, I would just feel like, crap person. You know, I don't deserve the nice stuff. And I would really feel rotten just sitting in the mess and just really feeling, I would judge myself. So when, you know, you came along, the system came along, it was like, you've got freedom and you're not a bad person. Sorry.
Don't get upset. Don't get upset. But that just shows what a journey it was, and you know, you've come so far, and you don't need to go back to that place, Cheryl. You know, you've done all the hard work. You're living with the routines. You're living with the system. You're living with less. You know, you've been able to find the life that you want. You're living the life, truly the life that you're meant to lead, and that's the thing. And you know, it's really interesting because one of the things, you know, just to sort of finish off now. When we were working together, I mean, the job that you had, and I know that you were very unhappy in it, was kind of almost the perfect job for you. You were working in you had a kind of well-being role, didn't you, for women in a museum, and you know, and so you asked me to come and talk on a sort of well-being program with 4 or 5 other speakers, and I did, and I remember getting that, and it was so, and I was excited to be asked. I come in, I bob in as the Clutter Fairy and chat with my kind of little quirks and anecdotes and things like that. And it was quite a heavy program of things like, you know, and the one thing that really resonated with me was there was a talk on female genital mutilation, which is obviously a serious issue. And I was so embarrassed to be the Clutter Fairy, which is kind of seemed so trite on such a serious agenda. But you saw that, and you saw how critical it is to people's well-being, and you were like, no, this is not, you should not be embarrassed, this deserves its place as much as anything else on that agenda. And I think that's when I learned from you how seriously you took it and how big of an impact that you thought that decluttering and simplification has in people's lives. And so thank you for asking me, and that I still remember that to this day. You know, I deal with a lot of clients, but you definitely had a real impact on me, Cheryl, for the reasons, and it obviously had a deep impact on you because you're getting emotional now. So hopefully you're not emotional anymore. Have you stopped now? Now that I've been talking. I want to end on a high. I want to end on a high, because don't go back to that place, because you know you've done a brilliant job, and it's so exciting for me, you know, to be a facilitator for something like that. You know, we're so lucky, the job that we do, we are so lucky to be invited into people's homes to be able to make that difference and to help people along their journey. You know, this is your journey, it's not ours, but we're just there to facilitate.
Yeah, and this is going to sound strange, but the tears then that have just come up unexpectedly were ones that, as the woman I am now, I sit here and I look at the woman that I was, and I'm sort of crying for the sadness that was and the relief, like not the whole, like I'm not in that place anymore. And this seeing of how far I've come, which is just incredibly powerful. You know, I mean, I'm sitting here, I feel great, I've still got tears rolling down my cheeks, but it's more in a sort of farewell
I'm not that woman. But it was a recognition as well that life was just ever so sad because I didn't have one. And the reason why it was so important for me to invite you on that day, which, yes, at the time I was a manager working in human rights, and I was championing the rights for women, and I was running a conference about female genital mutilation and domestic violence, and we had speakers, and it was important that you were one of those speakers, Lesley, because I've just demonstrated why. Many of us, men and women, in particular, though, I'd say women, but I do want to include men too. But that agenda was all about, it was for International Women's Day. There is this shame and this pressure that we are supposed to be domestic goddesses. We're supposed to be living pristinely. And for the vast majority of us, we've got addictions to shopping or hoarding or whatever it is, collecting. And it is a slow death. And it deserves to be timetabled and platformed just as much as any other abusive or detrimental or degrading situation that one finds themselves in. It cannot be reduced. It is different, but that does not mean to say it is less. And I wanted as many women in particular, because it was International Women's Day, but I wanted women to get the chance for freedom like I did. I mean, my tears then was for seeing a woman that is now free. I am now free. For a long time, I was imprisoned in my own mess. And no one was throwing me a rope. And I was like, this is hopeless. What the hell am I going to do? I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. And it was like that for years, no exaggeration. So any system, or I keep saying the word system, but that's what it is for me. It's now a lifestyle, but anything that provides a way out of that is done in your way, that is done in the way that looks like your life, is incredibly precious. So it deserves to be up there. You deserve to be up there. And it was incredible. And if I remember rightly as well, there was a standing ovation after you spoke. And there was a lot of women afterwards coming up to you and also coming up to me saying, thank you so much. I've got a bit of a problem. My life's a mess. In secret. Why should we have to have these things in secret? Why can't we be more open about us clearing through the clutter? Why can't we just have conversations and dialogues where, yeah, okay, let's sort this out. Let's find out about businesses like yours and let's do this together instead of having a little head down, which is what I was. It's given me so much more than just the freedom of being who I am and living the life that I live now.
Wow, Cheryl, that is so fantastic. I'm going to finish there on such a positive note. I really hope that other people have been inspired by your story. I'm so, so happy that I invited you on as a guest. I've absolutely loved listening to you. I could sit here for hours and hours listening to you, but sadly it is time to go. So Cheryl, tell the listeners where they can find a little bit more about you and what you do.
You can find me at spiritualyogis.com. So it's www.spiritualyogis.com. So spiritualyogis.com. And it's for anyone that wants to heal themselves through yoga, nutrition, counselling and sort of spiritual cleansing, and it's done online, so it doesn't matter whereabouts in the world you are. If you're sick of being sick and you want to declutter your body from the inside out and get your life back, please drop me a line and say hello.
Oh, Cheryl, thank you so much. It's been brilliant. Loved it. So, listeners, thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. If you'd like to get more tips and advice, please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and have a lively, supportive Facebook group community where we chat all things clutter. We'd love to see you there. If you don't want to miss the next weekly episode, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast on iTunes, Spotify and Stitcher, and it will pop into your notifications each Friday. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration and Don't forget to tune in next week.